All right, it's that time again where I'm lucky enough to be able to sit down with two fantastic members of the classic team. These guys are probably sick of me by now, but quite frankly, I'm okay with that. Aggrend, mate, how are you?
Pretty good, man. How are you?
Good, man. Tim, what's cracking? I feel like I catch up with you all the time now.
Yeah, we were hanging out Saturday morning. Well, for me, Saturday morning.
I love it.
But yeah, it's good to see you, Josh.
Have you seen the Bigfoot conspiracy theories surrounding your post in the Countdown Discord already?
No,
Oh,
I
they're
haven't.
brilliant. They're brilliant. The blurry photos getting thrown around, people asking, is this real? Is this real? It's so good. But anyway,
Nice.
mate, let's get started, guys. Look, we're lucky enough. Thank you to the PR team for gifting us 45 minutes this time. So, guys, I can actually chill out a little bit and we can take our time sort of with these questions. And I want this to be, super conversational and get your thoughts on kind of the making of P4 and things like that. Guys, let's kick off with Black Rock Mountain. Um, Look, Josh, I'll probably start with you because you mentioned that you were actually look. I always laugh, Josh, because I'd probably throw this out to you and Tim whether you guys get the shits or not. That the whole community seems to think that this is Josh's game. You know what I mean? You see it all the time, like classic lead dev Josh Greenfield to Grand, and I'm always like, he's a producer. He's the one of the head honcho producers. It's not his game and all that stuff, but people don't care. People want to think what they think. But anyway, Josh, you did actually work pretty hard on, I think, the PVE side of Black Rock Mountain. So we'll kick off with you and just say, like, just starting off with PVE. I mean, people seem pretty happy with it. Were you?
Yeah, I think so. We definitely learned some lessons from previous events and stuff like that. We just kind of applied that there when looking at kind of the amount of time that you spend on it and like kind of what you get from it. It's a lot more in line with what we would have wanted from this. It's pretty lightweight. You go, you spend 15, 20, 25 minutes doing it, and then you're kind of done for the day. Not a whole lot to it, but I think the thing I'm really happy with is just kind of the flavor aspect of it. I think like, it didn't take us all that long to like make the quests, but I think we spent more time on like the cool ash storm and like the fiery meteors and stuff like that. And I think it has a really good vibe, and I'm very pleased with how that kind of turned out.
All
It
right.
feels like a battle too, which is kind of cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, you got the easy one. Now you're ready for the hard stuff. That's all you get for a warm up. Mates, obviously the talk of the town was what was happening inside the mountain on the PvP side of things. I've been pretty scathing, to be honest with you. You guys know my feelings towards res timers, and this harkens back to the Ashen Vale days and everything. There's so many questions there about what needs to be in the game and what doesn't need to be in the game. You guys have been working on this event, obviously, as time goes on. I said to everyone on the podcast, don't freak out about what happens on day one. We all know they tweak it over the first week and everything. But with where it's at now, is there more coming for Black Rock Mountain, or is this kind of it as we're sitting? Because the one thing that people do seem to be, worried about are those res timers. And I sort of said,
Yeah.
it's one thing to invite people to a PvP event and then punish them for taking part in it, seemingly, once you meet that 2-minute res timer. Tell me about the internal discussions about the Black Rock Mountain event on the PvP side of things.
You want to take this one, Tim, or you want me to?
You can jump on it.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, it's honestly like, I think we all sort of go into these things with like a lot of hope that we'll be able to set up a thing and give people the tools to kind of have good fights in these situations. And going into it, I don't think we would have done it. Looking at the data, like I contrary to popular belief, the servers, the major PvP servers like Lava Lash, Crusader Strike, Living Flame, they're still pretty much literally perfectly balanced in terms of daily average, faction population. And so, I think there's always a hope that it's like, well, we've sort of, in terms of numbers, everyone kind of has the tools they need to have good fights. But what ends up happening, I think sometimes is, one faction kind of makes up their mind that they're going for something different than another faction on any given time or day or layer. And then that ends, it kind of leads to some sort of, I don't know, unfun experiences for the other side. I think it's pretty likely we're going to make some additional adjustments here, especially to like the bonus honor and stuff like that. That, you know, I think we expected it, that no matter what we do, and even if we were to like say we turn that off, I think Blackrock Mountain would still kind of be a bloodbath. But you know, I think it's probably pretty safe to say that there will be at least a little bit more adjustments coming pretty soon. We kind of wanted it to play out. We wanted to see if, you know, on any given day, the Alliance or the Horde or whoever kind of galvanized to get together and have a fight. And it's, you know, it's on some servers it's played out that way, and on others less so.
All right.
So.
Tim, I'll get to you in a second. I got to keep grilling the big man over here for a second. It's like, you guys know I fucking love you, but I got to do my job as well. Josh, you said something that piqued my interest. Look, on the server balance thing, I've been one of those voices again amongst many out there in the community, you know, tilting their heads and questioning the server balance, because you and I behind the scenes have chatted about this before, and I understand how disgruntling it is for you guys when you've got the data there in front of you, and you very well, I've said this to you privately, I've no reason to disbelieve that you're staring at figures that you're like, you know, tapping the sign on the bus going, it's literally 50-50, like, guys, get off our backs. However, the question has been, how is that data comprised? Because obviously the lived in experience of many players, and this might be a layer to layer thing, or, you know, what level percentage of the figures you're looking at are made up of level 60 characters, or how I call them active level 60 characters. Yeah. Can the data lie to you guys? Do you know what I mean?
And that's something, honestly, I think I've kind of Tom Ellis, who sometimes talks about populations and stuff. He's one of our live ops engineers. Yeah. Live ops producers. Sorry. You know, I've come to him. I think he's kind of sick of me because I'm like, are we sure this is right? Like, you know, like, because you know, I look at it every day, and then I get people screaming at me that's like, this is not balanced, there's no way this is balanced. Yeah. And so it even makes me doubt it, even though like looking at literal like numbers that can't possibly really lie to me. And so you know, the short answer is it's essentially it's basically a rolling average of logged in players, like the total number of players on each faction at a given time. Now, it doesn't take into account levels necessarily, but I don't think there's nothing that suggests, like looking at like the analytics data of like the leveling curves of like what's the average player level faction to faction. I don't think we've seen anything that suggests there's a disproportionate number of levelers versus max level characters or anything like that. I think the reality is that on any given time, you may end up in a position in a place in the world where you're outnumbered. And that's always kind of been true on a PvP server. I'm not trying to gaslight anybody when I say this either. Like, I understand that lived experiences are dramatically different. There are times, you know, one of the servers I play on is a PvE server, and it actually does have way more Alliance players on it than Horde. And I play Alliance, and there's sometimes where I feel like I see nothing but Horde. Like, I'll wait for like five spawns to get a Tectonis tag because the Horde just keeps tagging it over and over. Yeah. But it's like, I know for a fact my faction is much more populated than theirs. It's just they are there at the time that I am, and if it was a PvP server, I would have a bad time. And so it's always just kind of a perennial thing with PvP servers that while the total population is equal, where you are at that moment may not be. Yeah. And also there's also, I think, kind of a snowball effect too. Like, you know, I know a lot of Alliance players have had a hard time with World PvP because they feel like they're super outnumbered. Well, I think again, not trying to gaslight, but I do feel like there is a sort of psychological thing that happens where the Horde, like, if you win 99 times, there's nothing that will tell you won't win the 100th time, so you'll keep going and looking for that fight. Whereas the you know, the other faction, if you've lost a bunch, you may just be like, I'm just gonna hang out in town. I'm gonna roll in a group only, or I'm not gonna, you know what I mean? So yeah. I think that there is a psychological aspect to it. It's something that I think it's something that I think will never really perfectly be able to put like a pin on making it perfect on PvP servers, because there's just so many variables that can lead to in the moment where you're at having, you know, an unfair fight. And at the end of the day, all fights on PvP servers are almost all are unfair fights.
Yeah,
That's
despite my
kinda how
best
PvP
efforts to
servers
make
work.
them fair, I agree. And look, it is a subjective experience. I do appreciate that. I mean, I saw someone on Twitter just yesterday adding Tom, and they were like, "Hey man, Lone Wolf is completely horde dominated. Let me transfer off." And I saw that tweet. I didn't say anything because I've been on a really bad aggressive tear on Twitter recently. And I was like, "Are you kidding me? Like, I play on Lone Wolf. It is like my experiences are absolutely not horde dominated. You're on drugs." But anyway, we'll move on because, as you say, it varies from person to person. Well, a slight move on. Tim, I'll throw it over to you, mate. And just to tie off this point, Tim, you've been so kind and jumping in on a bunch of Countdown to Classic recordings lately, and we love having you there and chatting with you and having your input thrown in live in the moment. It made me think about sort of some of the interactions that you, or some of the feelings that you might have had when you hear commentary about the team making the game, because so much of this BRM PvP stuff, you do get those comments about, and you guys, hopefully it's water off a duck's back at this point, where you get a lot of like, does the team even PvP? All these PvP events seem to be made by people who don't have that much experience with PvP. What's going on? When you see comments like that, how do you obviously see them? What's the discussion? What's the feeling within the team when you see that?
I mean, we have a wide variety of people at various experience levels on our team. We have folks who are hardcore PvPers who have done the original Grand Marshal High Warlord climb in the original era, in 2019 era, and we have hardcore PvEers, we have casual players, and so we poll people about these things. We're actively having those discussions about whether or not we should shut the event off entirely and then try to play it out from there as well. It's like, well, is it actually the bonus honor that's forcing people to act these ways? And we talk to the people who might be actually ganking people in Blackrock Mountain, who are on our team.
Got a couple of griefers on our team.
Yeah.
Maybe a little bit.
And in coming to the conclusion that we could turn off honor entirely in Blackrock Mountain, but that probably wouldn't solve the issue. I think the real issue is just, Blackrock Mountain it's a very unique place in World of Warcraft where there is more sort of, it's one of the largest sort of centers of content, from 5-man content to raid content in the entire game.
On that point, Tim, if I can be rude and interrupt, just to
Sure.
point you down this side street while you're almost there. And I promise we're finishing the Blackrock Mountain stuff soon because I don't want to talk about it the whole time. But I was one of the critical voices saying, why the choice of Blackrock Mountain when so much organic traffic goes there anyway? It seems like an odd decision to pump up the PvP event around this location when there's so many other places that we could have sent players. So tell me about why the choice was made for Blackrock, and if you guys are still happy with that choice, and then also to layer on top of that to do the honor bonus inside the mountain rather than outside. Are you guys still happy with that choice?
I think the inside the mountain versus outside was more that we wanted people to be able to complete their outdoor objectives, and so giving people a bonus to PvP inside the mountain was more of a more of that equation where we wanted people to have safety outside. We all remember the patch. I don't remember the exact patch in vanilla era where it was impossible to even run from Thorium Point into Blackrock Mountain. And I know we're seeing similar in phase 2. We're seeing echoes of that. And we don't want that. Like we want people to be able to do the content that they want. Obviously there's things that folks have to experience on a PvP server, but I don't know. Did you want to jump in, Josh?
One of the things that we did, a lot of what we did with it was informed directly by what happened with like nightmare incursions early on, where it was really difficult to get in the portal. It was really difficult to pick up your quests at the quest giver, and that was why it's like, let's just try and push people away from the PVE part of it. So if you want to focus on your dailies and rep and stuff, you can do that, and then get people into a different area for the PvP stuff. And we figured, again, Blackrock Mountain, it was going to happen anyway. So why not play it up? And one of the things we tried to do was adding that graveyard in the middle of Blackrock Mountain. Like, obviously, if you had to run from Thorium Point, that's what kind of makes it miserable. We thought that would help. We really quickly realized, like, in actual practice on like scale, that it's like just the graveyard isn't enough, right? And like that's just like a day one realization. And that's why we pretty quickly put in the kind of the bloodless thing from Blood Moon, so you can move quickly at least. That's probably still not enough to make it not a painful experience, and I think we could do more there.
Did you feel, Josh? Sorry, I'm going to be keep being rude, guys. Did you feel, Josh, that my perception is that the Classic team got quite caught up with the iconic nature of Blackrock Mountain, and it absolutely is iconic. It's epic. It's fantastic, and all those things. Did you feel that if you made it somewhere like in Azshara, that the base wouldn't have gone there for the content?
Hard to say.
It's quite possible. I mean, in previous phases, the dichotomy between like where PvE content was centered to where PvP content was quite different. Maybe in Ashen Vale, a little bit closer to each other, but especially in phase 2 with Nomergon being the marquee PvE content and Stranglethorn being the PvP content, you had that split in where people wanted to be at certain times during the day. And so, yeah, I think we probably made a mistake. We made a mistake like encouraging that type of PvP around the main PvE hub of the game. But again, we're learning. We're going to do our best to fix those issues, to add the quality of life issues that Blood Moon Stranglethorn event had, that we probably should have had right from the get-go in going into this phase. So we're working as fast as we can to remedy those mistakes. We're gonna learn from witnessing firsthand what it's like to have a PvP event right on top of the most busy PvE hub of the phase, and hopefully in future phases we can be more thoughtful about that implementation and where those places of interest are and how they overlap.
Too easy, guys. We'll move on. Look, I'm not trying to like obviously admonish you guys and get like mea culpas like that, squeeze them out of you like juice, but like there's just there are some tough topics sort of at the top here, and I appreciate time is already waning, but we'll move on to the next one and just talk about, Tim, to keep you rolling now. This will be more your field than Josh's on MC.
Sure.
I'm really intrigued. We rarely get these moments where we get to sit down with devs and sort of talking about, the making of raids, and appreciating that you didn't, make MC, you made this version of MC. And we've also had the level up raids along the way that you obviously had a great hand in designing the encounters for. So we'll take an opportunity of, the 5 to 10 minutes we get to talk about this with you and just say, look, mate, you sat through that Countdown to Classic recording the other day with the hardcore raiders really giving some pretty vigorous input on Heat Level 3. We didn't get to talk about Heat Level 1 as much as I would have liked, but you heard everything that was said. How did you feel about how players are taking in the heat levels already and their relationship with fire res and everything, and taking into account how you designed all the encounters?
I mean, it's tough because I think that especially in the Discord discussion that you're referring to, there's a certain pedigree of player, and a lot of people might not fess up to it, but people who are participating in podcasts talking about, like, even having verbal discussions about content are a very different type of player than probably the majority of people who are partaking.
They're giant nerds. Let's just call it out. Yeah.
And that was one of the things that we were talking about, is like, who is this content for? And how do we accommodate the broad spectrum of players that we have in Season of Discovery? Because Like we have a large variety of people playing the game for very different reasons. And that's, one of the design challenges on World of Warcraft is that there's not just one type of person playing this game. Whether you're talking about classic or whether you're talking about modern World of Warcraft, it's people come from very different places, have very different skill levels, and want different things out of the game. And so one of the design goals that we had for Molten Core, on one end, it's also different from our level up raids in that people are extremely familiar with MC. In much different ways than people were familiar with Black Fathom Deeps, Nummergon, and Sunken Temple. Those were kind of like those instances. They had some popularity, but they were kind of second fiddle to the first string instances while leveling up. And so how do you maintain sort of the memory, the found photograph of Molten Core that stays true to the people who want no changes, who just want to like take their newfound powers from leveling up and go through the Molten Core that they know, versus the people who want an extreme challenge, who want major design changes with some of these bosses. And it's incredibly difficult to balance that. And we thought having sort of a heat system where the intensity of mechanics, the frequency that bosses do certain things, and fire resistance, the literal manifestation of how powerful like fire abilities can be, and how to counteract that. Could we play that up in different difficulty levels of Molten Core? And so that's kind of how the heat system itself came to be. Especially where we don't have explicit difficulty modes that you're selecting from a UI. We wanted to let players sort of choose their difficulty as they went through Molten Core. We wanted there to be a progression from start to finish. I think a lot of people, there's issues with the heat system. It's definitely not perfect. And there's improvements that can be made.
In saying that,
a lot of people. Yeah,
I
sure.
think you did. I think the heat system is a great choice. I really sort of applaud you guys for that. But Tim, to push you down this angle, do you feel that? How do you feel when, again, you're the guy making these encounters? You're trying to sort of, push us a little bit as a player base. How do you feel as a dev when you keep seeing these comments every phase rolling in about make it easier, oh my God, make it easier? It's like Groundhog Day over and over again. And we obviously had the chat the other day about, look, okay, fuck, maybe we've got a unique circumstance with these heat levels that you potentially could make a redonkulously easy, 2019 old school version of MC if people want that, and then have all these extra mechanics for people that want that. You seemed relatively receptive to a suggestion like that, but I don't want to sort of say it's going to happen or anything, but how did you feel when you heard that?
I think that was our goal. That's not a new idea. When we were making it, the heat levels, we were explicit, we were adamant about wanting heat level 1 to be extremely approachable. We, obviously there's some measure of expected DPS that we hold players accountable for, but we try to be as generous as possible in terms of that expectation of what the average player, of what the average group composition will bring into a 20-player Molten Core, to the point where we don't want people wiping. That's not the experience we want on Heat 1. We want, if you've gone to the trouble of running some dungeons to get some pre-bis gear, of getting your group together in the first place, of having moderate to maybe low amount of gear that's actually enchanted, you have your runes, but you got your group together. Amazing. Like that was basically the requirement for the original Molten Core. It rewarded getting folks together, having a casual fun time with each other. You kill some bosses, you have some fun. It's not stressful. You get some loot and it feels good. And that's what we wanted Heat 1 to be. And there are some bosses that we recognize we got in this morning. We've been having a lot of interviews, so we haven't had a ton of time to actually like look and digest the information that's coming through, the telemetry that's coming through from the success rates of certain groups. And we want to, make measured responses to the telemetry that we're getting to make sure that the intended design of Molten Core falls in with where we were aiming. And one thing to remember, we don't have a PTR. And some of the surprise that comes with not having a PTR is great, but it also means that we might be slightly off of where we were aiming with some of these mechanics. The need for movement or coordination might be too high on some bosses. I think that there's probably, just from looking at data quickly, like Gar and Geddon are probably way too hard on Heat 1 than they should be. And it kind of evens out going from Shazra into Golmag and Sulfurin. But even Rag might be a little too hard too on Heat 1. And so we're looking at ways of is it mechanically? Do they have too much HP?
Yeah.
Maybe some of the Season of Mastery style mechanics where there's permanent area denial from Inferno and Living Bomb. Maybe there's too many targets from Living Bomb. We're looking at ways to tone that down so that Heat 1 lines up with where we were.
Josh, let me throw it to you, and just to wind this topic up, and I've got to move on or we won't get any of this stuff done. But thanks for that, Tim. Josh, I'm sort of but I'm inviting you guys and giving you a platform to give an unhinged tee off on the player base, which I know you would never do because you can't do that. But, in as euphemistic a nature as you can, like I said to Tim, how do you feel as a producer or as a dev on the game when you continuously see the feedback coming back saying, oh, make it easier. Like, I feel like I say we because I would put myself into probably what is the same mentality that the dev team has, I'm guessing, is that I continuously seem to overestimate what the classic player base is prepared to take on difficulty-wise. Like, it really does seem like they mean it when they say they want to press one button and the boss falls over. Sure. How's that been making the game for that kind of mentality?
It's funny. I think I get a lot of kind of raw. I'd like to think I make myself pretty available to people in the community. I'm not able to respond to everything like I used to be able to, but I definitely get a lot of DMs. I read a lot of DMs. I get a lot of messages from people, and it's almost kind of split down the middle of people saying this needs to be easier or this needs to be harder, or I want the next thing to be harder, or I want the next thing to be easier. I think that's really, kind of just touching on what Tim said. That's the challenge, right? Is that we have such a diverse cross section of people playing that it's really difficult to say what is the objectively correct choice. I think the approach we took for Molten Core is a solid one because it allows us to kind of individually tune each of these sort of stepstones to fit, more of what we said. I think one of the things that we're trying to do is we're trying to kind of keep as our true north. Like, we put out a blog post talking about like what we kind of expected from each heat level, and does it hit that expectation? Like, I would argue, I've done a good chunk of Heat 1 and Heat 2 personally with my group and my guild, and I would argue that Heat 1 and 2, there are probably some areas in Heat 1, definitely in Heat 1, that are too hard. There's probably some areas even in Heat 2 that are too hard compared to what we wanted and expected based on our playtesting. And so we just need to make adjustments from there. But in terms of there's no universal call for it to be easier or harder. In fact, I feel like every time we say oh, we want it to be X, we get an overwhelming deluge of people saying, no, it needs to be Y. I think that would be no matter what we said. I think we'd kind of get it.
Fair enough. We're the worst.
The people who agree with me aren't likely to talk to me. The people who don't agree are.
There you go, Tim. I gave him the opportunity to tell the community to get good, and he didn't take it. But I'm reading the subtext. It's okay.
I'm in a dad guild too, man. I get it. I don't want to. I don't know if in my advanced stage, if I want to sweat super hard either.
Yeah.
But
no, I agree. And I'm an advocate for make Heat level 1, just like, 2004, 2019 MC. So it's all good, guys. But anyway, Tim, really, really quick, just to finish up on this, it seems to be, here's an opportunity for you to clap back. There is a perception that there is a copy-paste job going on from the SOM mechanics to SoD. You suggested that there are subtle differences that people have not picked up on. Do you want to defend what's going on here with SOD MC a little bit?
Sure. On one hand, we also have some of the more vocal people who actually participated in Season of Mastery. So yes, there are a lot of Season of Mastery mechanics that have come back, but to a lot of people, those are brand new. And I think one of the folks on your podcast was saying, like, that's an efficient use of our time.
I agree.
If there's a good mechanic that people liked from Season of Mastery and it fits well within what we're trying to do in Season of Discovery, then why not use that?
Yeah. Well, my prediction, Tim, was that you'd use the SOM mechanics and splash in just a couple of new things. Is that what happened?
Yeah. I mean, there might. I don't know if people have noticed, like Sulfuran Harbinger actually throws his spear on higher difficulties at certain people and makes area denial. That wasn't Season of Mastery. I know we had a submerge phase in Season of Mastery for Ragnaros, but folks might have missed that. Well, I don't think folks have missed it, but folks actually progging on Rag on Heat 3 will notice that when the Sons of Flame reach 10% health, they'll do a mini Baron Geddon sort of Armageddon thing, and when they explode, they pull all players in. So if you try to AoE all of the Sons of Flame at the same time, then you will unfortunately get pulled in, and they'll all Armageddon explode on you. That was not in Season of Mastery. All Sons of Flame did was have mana burn and extra attacks, and when they died, Ragnaros popped back up. So there's subtle things like that where a creature or boss will do slightly more with a mechanic, but yeah,
there you go. I said to the guys, we can say I was right now. I said to the guys, let's give some, credit to Tim's creative flair. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
I think too. We there's a degree of with Molten Core, especially in these like kind of iconic raids, especially like I would argue that there's not a lot about the original mechanics that need fixing. I think we could spice them up, but keeping things approachable and familiar is definitely something we think about. Like we want it to have the vibe that it had. Like that's always kind of something like where we will reinvent some wheels, but others we kind of want to let them play out as people kind of expect. Maybe with just a twist, and I don't think that's a bad thing.
All good. Okay, guys, I've spent way too long on the first 2 points. We're going to rip through everything else I've got written down here. The next question is just, all I've written down is Zyrene okay? And it more revolves around, look, obviously Zyrene and the team working their asses off on the classes. What classes are being looked at right now or deemed of, I put this in quotes, in need of help at the moment, that I know you guys have been holding off touching the classes for the first few weeks, but what's sort of first cab off the rank coming up when the changes come in?
I will say, I think there's nobody that's really specifically on the radar right now. Like it's shaking out much how I would expect it to. Molten Core, kind of at its base level, it has a few kind of melee unfriendly mechanics, and I think that's being sort of reflected in logs and things like that, where you look at like hunters and warlocks and classes that can kind of sit in the back and blast, and they're doing very, very well right now. Whereas warriors, like a lot of melee classes other than rogues are doing really well. Like they're struggling a little bit more because some of the mechanics make it a little bit harder for them. And I think that's kind of okay. Like there's nothing that's like terrifying to us at this moment. That being said, it's something we're going to kind of continue to look at. I think we do definitely want to let a few weeks of Molten Core happen, a few weeks of people getting different gear, getting getting better gear as they go before we start making really drastic changes.
Okay,
because that's just we don't want to cut the legs out from under someone before we actually see how it actually in a real world scenario at scale sort of shakes out.
I can hear I can hear one of my listeners screaming somewhere in Australia. It's your old friend Wonder, who you've had an interaction with in the past, who happened to send in a listener question about this very point. And when he hears you say that there's melee unfriendliness in Molten Core, he had this one where he says, The melee meta, the melee, I should say, I always do. The melee meta has dominated much of SoD and Classic era. Is an effort being made to shake up the meta in this regard, or are we to continue to expect melee cleave groups to be pretty dominant? In addition to that, sorry. In addition to that, it's been mentioned that buffing the rogue poison may be a catch-all approach to buffing casters. Could other approaches also be considered? Blah 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 blah. All right, do you disagree with that, Aggrend?
I do disagree. I kind of disagree that it's a melee meta. I mean, look, at the highest skill levels, if you take 20 of the best class, or 15 of the best class, that's going to be the best thing for whatever it is you're trying to do. And in original WoW, it was you take 35 warriors, like 2 healers, and you just blah 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 blah, blender through it. I don't necessarily agree if it's like, I mean, if you kind of look at like Warcraft logs right now, I wouldn't necessarily say it's the melee meta. It might be the rogue meta, it might be the survival hunter meta, but it's not necessarily the melee meta exclusively, holistically. But I don't know, it's one of those things that I think we're just going to kind of keep looking at it and keep making adjustments as needed. There's definitely some classes that can come up. I know Wonder plays a balanced druid. I also have a balanced druid character. They could maybe do a little bit better, but go into your like using like the rogue poisons to kind of prop up casters. That's a thing that we really like because it doesn't have quite as much impact on like PvP and other aspects of the game, and it allows us to kind of turn the knobs, and also give a class that may not have had as much utility as they wanted, some actual real cool utility that they can apply to help their fellow raiders out. And I think that's a cool design, and we all generally really like that kind of thing.
Good stuff.
So that's definitely something that can be tuned. Yeah.
It's also important to mention that we're taking much greater care to do a better job of tuning encounters this time around. There were some actual just straight up mistakes that were made in Sunken Temple in terms of how creatures were tuned. I think that's obvious to people. But in terms of Molten Core, we've been much more careful and deliberate with taking what we expect for an average group composition that definitely isn't meta. We're not tuning around world buffs. And so I think we're being very generous in terms of the numbers that we expect people to have to defeat certain bosses. So the meta is not necessary by any means to have a fighting chance against these bosses. So obviously the most efficient strategy will come through, but that's not what we're aiming for.
I think one of the things that has pleased me the most looking at Molten Core is just how valuable a class like, say, Shadow Priest is on Heat 3. Turns out having a really crazy healing battery that does pretty good damage and gives you a bunch of mana, very valuable whenever there's a lot of damage flying around.
Your Twitter piece on the Shadow Priest has paid off in the end, Aggrend. There you go. Utility.
Kind of suspected it might. I don't know. We'll see how it ends up shaking out in the long run.
Well,
I feel like it's going pretty well.
You didn't answer the question, Aggrend. Is Zyrene okay?
Zyrene's doing great. He's doing great. We're having a good time.
All right, we're going to burn through like a million questions now, guys, in our last 10 minutes or so. Look, let's go to this one, Tim. This is for you. I think this is probably more in your domain. From Wonder again. The role of professions in Phase 4 is taking a significant backseat relative to the 0.5 tier gear for some classes. Right now, the value from leatherworking, tailoring, enchanting, and alchemy don't offer significant personal DPS gains for some classes. Is this a design intent or a potential oversight? Tim, what's the deal with professions in Phase 4? What are we doing?
Josh might actually be able to tank this.
Oh, sorry, Josh, go for it.
Yeah, you might have me to blame for this. I'm the one who made a lot of like the phase 1, 2, and 3 profession changes myself. I think it was, we knew that the tier 0.5 was going to be a big focus of content for this phase. Every time we go into a patch, we kind of look at like all the things we want to do, and then we look at, and that's part of what I do, right, is trying to figure out what we actually can do in the time we have and everything like that. And ultimately, I think we probably would have wanted to do a little bit more there. And we didn't quite do everything we wanted to do. I don't know if I'd call it an oversight. It was all pretty intentional, but at the same point, like, I think in retrospect, it would have been cooler to do a little bit more. I think that the danger is trying to chase that like let's make every profession have exactly equal personal output in every patch. Like I don't think we're going to ever hit that, and I don't think that's necessarily a goal that we should be chasing. I think that's subjective. Like other people could have other opinions on that, but I would like to do more with professions. Professions are something that's very near and dear to me. I was obviously, I was heavily invested in what we did in the first few phases, and I would like to kind of keep that going. Kind of want to see, maybe even see what the shadowy figure's doing. I don't know. We haven't
Very
seen her
good.
in a while.
Very good.
Yeah.
Tim, I think this might be you. You mentioned you made Demonfall Canyon, yeah, Tim?
I worked on it, yes.
There you go. All right. This one's from Waylander. Are you concerned with the seeming lack of interest in Demonfall Canyon? It seems that many servers have a lack of groups running it, mainly because the gear seems to be melee focused. Casters and healers are more reluctant to run it more than one time. Is this something that will be considered for future new content?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because you can make the most amazing encounters and the most interesting dungeon itself, but if the rewards aren't set up in such a way that's enticing, then it could work to the detriment of the instance itself, like you brought up. I think that, however, there are a lot of interesting utility items that may become more valuable down the road in Demonfall Canyon, and I would argue that Demonfall Canyon isn't very popular. It might be not popular for some classes, but I think just looking at it, it might not be as popular as Upper Blackrock Spire or Scholomance or something where you get tier 0 explicitly from. But I think more people are running Demonfall Canyon than are Dire Maul.
I saw this question pop up on the Discord, and I was like, are they playing a different game than I am? Because I don't know. I feel like I run Demonfall Canyon like almost every day.
Well, I feel like people have clued onto it now, but the first couple of weeks there was very little chatter about it.
You know, I think part of it, honestly, and like Mr. GM actually made a tweet about this, and I kind of like read it and I was like, yeah, you're right. That he said something like, it's amazing to me that they didn't promote this more. And it's like one of those things that this is something we struggle with a lot in Season of Discovery of, like, what do we keep secret and what do we try and hype, and trying to find that line. And that's almost one of the things that we could have a whole, and we will probably have whole retros on, like, what's the right amount of playing it coy and what's the right amount of getting things out in front of people. And I think it did fly under the radar because it wasn't really a front and center feature. It was something we kind of teased. And is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing? I think for the vibe of SoD, it was probably a good thing, but for the overall, like, kind of like, making the most of, like, promoting new things, it's like, man, maybe we could have been a little less secretive with it.
Something we had a lot of fun making, though. I don't know.
I can imagine.
If you go ahead, Josh.
No, I can imagine. Yeah, sorry, finish that off for sure.
Just it was originally part of one of the content designers' rune acquisitions for Priest. It was born from an idea where he just wanted to utilize that section of Ashen Vale, and we're just like, you have all these cool enemies that you want to put in here, like ideas for those enemies. Why don't we just make this a dungeon? And so that idea was born. We got paper designs out in just a few days. There are 3 encounter designers. We built the thing in about 2 weeks, and I think it gave us a lot of confidence in what we're capable of doing very quickly in the scrappy manner that we do on the classic team. And I'm definitely hoping we get more opportunities to build more content like Demonfall Canyon in the future.
I was on vacation whenever they decided to turn this into a dungeon, and I come back and I'm like, wait, we're doing a dungeon now?
Okay.
My producer brain, I got a little vein in my forehead may have stuck out, but it turned out really well.
On that note, I mean, I'm surprised to sort of hear that story, Josh, because you guys teased at BlizzCon, that there would be a new stuff, like a new dungeon or new raid, and everyone oohed and ahed at the slides that Tim presented at the end. So, I always said that this was a foregone conclusion that something like Demonfall Canyon was coming our way. But, really, really quick, like super duper quick, because I know you guys probably can't say, but, like, is it fair to say, are you guys able to suggest or hint or tease or smirk or something about, are we getting a new raid?
We want to. We'll see where it makes sense. There's definitely going to be content that's new coming next patch that people haven't seen before. Well, they've seen elements of before, and we made some hints as to that there's a quest line that people can do part of now that they won't be able to finish until next phase, and it'll hopefully lead into an encounter space that will be for more people than just a very few. So you can speculate on what that means, Josh. But
excellent,
yeah.
Excellent. One boss encounter, a la Onyxia, 60-man raid. Let's go. Guys, lightning round, then the big final question. Really, really quick, 10 seconds or less on these answers if we can. Look, word on the street is that Alliance and Horde tanks are taking different damage that's popped up today. Have you guys seen this? Do you know about it? Is it a thing?
I have to look. We've been pretty underwater these last several days.
That's okay. Look, it literally just popped up today on Reddit, and people seem pretty adamant there's like a 20% difference in damage that Horde's taking over Alliance. But if it's news to you guys, I'm sure that'll get dived into.
It's definitely on purpose. We want Horde to take more damage because we'll look at it.
Yeah, very good, very good. Yeah, if it's legit, I don't know if it's bullshit or not. Guys, really, really quick, you've hinted that runes, you're looking into potentially making earlier phase runes easier to acquire. Is this going to be a thing, or are you hesitant to do it?
I think
it's definitely going to be a thing.
Yeah. Short answer is we want to make some of the especially shared discoveries, like the Dark Riders thing. Like, you don't need to do that on every alt, right? Like, we want to try and figure out a way to do that. There are some things that are pretty unique to each class. There's storylines that are pretty unique to each class that we kind of want to. It's like we feel like it's an additive experience, and especially if they're bespoke to that class. But so I don't think that you'll ever get to a point where you'll go to a vendor and you'll just, I'm going to go on my level 1 character and buy every rune from a vendor right away. I don't think that's going to happen. Okay. But there are definitely some things we could do.
Yeah, definitely, like places where we require you to go into an instance and need other people, or like the Chaos Bolt rune where you got to thaw a frozen Murloc and there needs to be 3 unique fire damage sources.
Yeah,
things like that.
Started.
Like we're going to look at that so that you're not in a place in the game where you're surrounded by other people anymore. We're pushing people towards end game, so we want to make those
sooner rather than later, I presume.
Yeah.
Is that sooner rather than later? Is it fair to say?
It depends on what your definition of sooner is.
Yeah. Okay.
Might not come in a hot fix, but definitely aiming on making big improvements in the next patch.
All right, 2 quickies, then the big grand finale. This one's from Uador. Has everything been discovered?
Yes, I think in broad strokes, there's definitely a few aspects of things that I haven't seen people say like, oh, that's a reference to this, or that's there's probably a few little hidden nuggets there that haven't really been front and center.
So there's no snickering over at Blizz HQ about, I can't believe these fucking idiots haven't found that sword yet or something.
I don't think so. I don't know. It's we've got so many of those things that it's hard for any one of us to kind of keep track of them. I don't think there's anything major.
Okay, all good.
Never know. Maybe there is.
What are the plans to earn? This is from Vestige. What are the plans to earn AB rep in the coming weeks? Doesn't seem possible in the current meta of 0 STV event participation and 1 hour AB battleground queues.
Yeah, well, this is something we talk about a lot. We don't have anything specific to report, but we want to get really heavily incentivize Warsong and AB. That was a consequence of kind of how we handled those reps. We basically cap them early, and now AV is a thing, so no one wants to do it. We want to ameliorate that as much as we can, and that we want to hopefully address sooner rather than later.
All right, last question, guys. Thank you so much for your flexibility, Aramis. I promise this is it. We'll be done in a couple of minutes. Depends how these guys answer this one. Look, guys, I know ordinarily I would steer clear of saying what's next. Okay, I know you can only say so much, and that so much is usually nothing. But what can you give me in terms of, we've now gone through SoD and people feel how they feel about SoD. Is the next season going to, remain a halfway point between classic and that kata mop style feel that we kind of got with SoD? Are you leaning towards a more stripped down version of the next season? More like, not my classic plus. This is more my classic plus. You guys know what I'm talking about. And also layering on top of that, I think it's a foregone conclusion. I've been saying it for a while that we'll be getting a fresh vanilla, server from you guys at some point in the future. Are you able to say with you should feel good about that? Or what can you say?
that's a big question, and I'm going to try and answer as concisely as I can, and just say, going back. Well, this might not be that concise. Sorry.
That's okay.
Going back, if you think about like whenever we first announced Season of Discovery in November and we like put it out and everything, like if we had called that like a Classic Plus, I don't think I think that would have landed different, and I think we would at this point be in a place where we're not particularly happy with that as Classic Plus, right? One of the things that is extremely valuable about Season of Discovery is that it lets us take chances, it lets us do things, that we actually think won't really work all that well. Like we're not obviously deliberately trying to put out stuff that doesn't work, but we do like to see kind of like what is the boundaries, like what is the kind of like, can we nudge up against to see what works and what doesn't, and the what doesn't work is almost as important as a learning experience to us for what we want to do in the future is what does work. And so it's an exceptional opportunity to learn. And I know sometimes if someone encounters something they don't like, they get really frustrated and they get really mad at the existence of Season of Discovery. Or if someone wanted something different from their version of, like a Classic Plus, they get frustrated at the existence of Season of Discovery not being that. But it's all okay. It's all kind of something that we're trying to learn from and to build for, whatever else we do in the future. I think the short answer is like Season of Discovery is about as extreme in terms of the changes to vanilla that I think we'll probably like ever see from that. And I definitely think that we're all on the team. I think we're all kind of like, all right, we're ready to kind of like, this is fun. We're all playing the hell out of it, but we're ready to kind of, if we're thinking about what we want to do next, we're ready to pull back a little bit, I think. So I don't know. That's a little vague, little, I hope that kind of helps.
No, it does. It does. So just then I'll prod you towards the fresh vanilla question. I know you can't say anything, and whether or not you can give a fucking half wink or something. Like I said, I've been calling it a foregone conclusion. I think 2025 we will see almost like a reset on the era realms. Can those enjoyers hold out hope, or what are we doing?
Redacted. I don't know.
No, that's fine. Don't. You've said more than you could say with that. It's all good. It's all good.
A fresh is something we talk about it constantly. It's something we would like to do at some point.
All good. All good. Look, guys, I think that Aramis, unless I can keep going, I think, are we good, or should I push the friendship even further?
We should wrap it up here.
Yeah,
Thanks.
All good. Look, guys, thank you so much for your time here. Please do give my bit. I'm sorry again. Like, I know it always turns into a grilling. You guys must absolutely despise me, but the community loves these answers from you guys. Thank you for your time. Please give my best to the team. Congratulate Morgan on her winnings in Vegas.
I saw that. Nice.
And my best to Zaire and Chris and everyone, all the crew. Thank you so much for you guys are doing. I'm loving SoD, and I just hope everyone else sort of is having a good time with it.
Cool.
Thank you, Josh.
Thank you, Josh.